So today we're going to talk about literal equations. So literal equations are equations that contain at least two letters or variables. Okay, we can solve for any of them in terms of other variables and things like that. And those are the examples I'm going to show you today. So our first example, it says they want us to solve for y. So what we have to ask is what is attached to y? And what is currently attached is this positive x here. Okay, so to move it, we would have to put a minus x underneath it, and whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Those x's will cancel out, my y comes down, so I get y equals, now we can't combine this 3 with this x, and the reason is because they don't have the same letter. They would both have to have an x for us to be able to combine them. So in this case, we're just going to write it as is, which is 3 minus x. Once you have that letter that you needed by itself, you are done. Let's look at example B, and it says we're going to solve this equation for x. So that means we are going to keep this x. We want to make sure that that x right there gets isolated. So the first thing we got to do, we got to move what's attached to it. So we got to move this negative 4h. Since it's negative, we got to put a plus 4h underneath it. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So we're going to do plus 4h there as well. That 3x will come down, and we get g plus 4h. And again, because they don't have the same letter, you can't combine them. Okay, then we still have this 3 we have to deal with. And remember, when we have a number and letter right next to each other, that means they're being multiplied. To move it, we would have to divide both sides by 3. So we get our final answer of x equals g plus 4h over 3. Let's do another example. Okay, again, we're going to solve this equation for y. So we need to get this y by itself. So the first thing we got to move is this 4x. Since it's positive, we're going to put a minus 4x underneath it. So those 4x's cancel out. We'll bring down our 2y. So we get 2y equals, and again, we can't combine them, so it's just 6 minus 4x. It's just exactly what it is. Then we still have this 2 here that we have to get rid of, and since it's right next to that y, it's being multiplied. So to move it, we're going to have to divide both sides by 2. And we can actually divide these numbers here. So we're going to do 6 divided by 2, which gives me 3, and 4 divided by 2, which is 2. And since y is by itself, you're finished. So on letter D, we have this fraction. Remember, the first thing we should always do is get rid of fractions if we can. And remember, to get rid of fractions, you're going to multiply both sides by the denominator. And the denominator in this case is 4. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. This over on the left will just be 4hg. But on the right, this 4 will cancel out with the 4 you multiplied it with, leaving you with just that numerator of j plus a. And we're solving for a, so we still have to move this j, and since it's currently positive and being added, we're going to have to subtract j from both sides. They'll cancel out. And remember, nothing can combine, so it's just going to be what it says. So 4hg minus j equals a. And since a is by itself, and that's what we needed, that's our answer. So again, in this case, we're solving for w, but first we have to get rid of that fraction. Remember, to get rid of a fraction, you're going to multiply by the denominator of the fraction, which in this case is 3. Whatever I do to one side, I got to do the other. So that 1/3 gets canceled out with that 3. So we're going to have 3v equals whl. And we're solving for this w right here. What's attached to the w is hl. How is it attached? It's currently being multiplied. Remember, you have numbers and letters right next to it. It's multiplied. So to get rid of it, we're going to have to divide by HL. Whatever I do to one side, I got to do to the other. So I got 3V over HL equals W. And since W is by itself, that's our answer. On letter F, we're solving for G. But the problem with this is this G is in the denominator. So to do something, we have to get it out of the denominator. So by doing that, remember to get rid of a fraction and multiply both sides by that denominator, which in this case is g. Those g's will cancel out, so you're left with 2 plus x equals, and then that's just going to be 3yg. We're still solving for this g. What's next to that g is that 3y, and since it's being multiplied, we're going to have to divide it. So those cancel out. So we're left with 2 plus x over 3y equals g. Since g is by itself, that's our final answer. Some word problems. So it says a car's fuel economy, E, miles per gallon, is given by the formula E equals M over G. M is the number of miles driven, G is the number of gallons used. And it says solve the formula for M. So we're solving for M. So what's attached to that M? Right now that division by G is, we're going to get rid of something being divided by something else. We're going to multiply by the denominator, so that's going to be multiplied by G. So I get E G equals M. Is M by itself? Yes, it is. So therefore, that is our final answer. Then it said, if Claudia has an average of fuel consumption of 30 miles per gallon, and she used 9.5 gallons, how far did she drive? So again, we read what we know. We know that she has a fuel consumption of 30 miles per gallon. And it tells us in the top that E equals miles per gallon. So we know that in this case, E is going to equal 30. We also know that she used 9.5 gallons, and they tell us in the top that G is the number of gallons used, so we know in this case that our G is equal to 9.5. So we're going to use our equation to solve for M. So we have EG equals M. We know E is 30. We know G is 9.5, and they are being multiplied together. So now you multiply them out, and you get 285 miles is equal to M. All right, we have one more. And it says the formula of the volume of a cylinder is V equals pi r squared h, where r is the radius, and h is the height. It says solve this formula for h. So we want to get this h by itself. What's currently being attached to the h is this pi r squared. How it's being attached is they're all next to each other, which means they're being multiplied. So to get rid of it, we have to do the opposite of that, which is divide by everything that's attached to that h. So we get h on that side, and we're going to get v over pi r squared. And since h is by itself, that's what we're asked to do. We are done. Then it asks us, what is the height of this cylindrical swimming pool that has a radius of 12 feet and a volume of 1850? So we know it has a radius of 12. We know it has a volume of 1850. And then they tell us to use 3.14 for pi. So we know R is 12, V is 1810, and pi equals 3.14. We use the formula that we solve for, because we're solving for h. V over pi r squared equals h. Again, V is 1810 over 3.14 times 12 squared. Only the 12 is squared, though, because that's what it says in the equation. Use order of operations. Parentheses or exponents first. 12 squared is 144. And we multiply, so we're going to get 1810 over 462.15. And then when you divide, you're going to get this answer. And remember, we're going to be approximate. That's what this means right here. That means approximate. Okay, and because we had to round, that's why we're doing that. So that's our lesson for the day. Hope go ahead and let's practice on that math exam.